it's Pixie. I'm glad you've joined me here today. I started reading this book last night and I got 20 pages in before I realized that I don't know what Marc Chagall's paintings look like, because he started talking about how his work looks and I realized I didn't know. So I looked him up and I found this one painting that I will put it on the screen so you can see, and I instantly felt a surge of inspiration and like I need to paint my version of this. So that's what I'm gonna do today, a paraphrase of painting Whose Name I Don't Know by Marc Chagall. I'm really excited. I spent all last night sketching and I'm gonna get into splashing paint on and I'm just gonna have fun with it, see what happens, and hopefully it'll be a good time. Yeah, also, since I have you here, look at this beautiful setup for future booktube videos. This book is part of my Owl's Magical Readathon exams. And if you don't know what that is, it's a month-long readathon in April where you have reading prompts based on the different magical subjects at Hogwarts, and the whole thing is that you like take your exams, and then there's the Newts readathon in August where you can choose a different like magical career, and you need to read different subjects based on what career you want. I'm gonna be a curse breaker, I'm gonna do animagus training, I'm gonna do legal defense of fantastic beasts, and I'm also qualified to be a writer. This is my herbology owl. Starts with the letter M. I think I'm gonna do all 12 subjects actually, because it's the 18th of April today, and after I finish herbology I only have divination left, so I might as well do them all. I've read a lot of graphic novels for this, and I've also just been like reading like crazy because I haven't been doing much else, because I've been on sick leave and yeah, just not doing much. But I feel a lot better now, which you can probably hear and see and tell from the fact that I'm making this video. I have been talking for way too long now. Let's make the art. Hello, this is future Pixie, or past Pixie for you, but future for the Pixie you were just talking to. Anyway, I thought I would talk about the other books that I read for my Owl's Magical Readathon while you watch me do bad watercoloring, but enjoying it a lot. Spoilers, but I enjoy how this painting came out, but I also think it could have been a lot better, which tends to be how I feel about most of the things I make. But I'm always happy that I made it, so let that be a lesson to you. Be happy that you made things, even if you don't love the result. The thing is that I'm easily stressed, so I didn't want to stress myself out too much. So what I did was I started with 3 graphic novels. So right at midnight on April 1st, I read a graphic novel. So I already had like one down. I had also made a priority list of like the most important prompts for me that I most wanted to fill, the books I was most excited to read. I then ended up changing my TBR a lot, so I'm glad I never made a Owl's TBR video like I saw a lot of booktubers doing, because I changed almost all of it because I prepared it too far in advance because I was so excited. Anyway, the first graphic novel that I read was maybe more actually like a collection of comics, a Swedish one. It's called All I Want for Christmas is Planekonomi, which means planned economy, by Sara Granér. And this was for the ancient runes owl, and the prompt was to have a heart in the cover, or in the title, or on the cover. There is a little heart on there. You can barely see it, but it is there. So this was a gift from my lovely friend. So thank you, Maria, if you're watching. And I have taken way too long to read it, especially considering also that it came out in 2012. So some of the political commentary in it was a little bit dated, but that's no one's fault but my own for not having read it sooner. But I really enjoyed it. And she has a really fun and unique art style that I really enjoy, and I love the way she works with colors and just all of the shapes and things, and just how she draws. It's really cool looking, and I really enjoyed it. I give it 4 stars. And the next things I read were Over the Garden Wall, volumes 1 and 2. So the Over the Garden Wall logo has a bird in it. So the first one, I filled my Care of Magical Creatures owl because the prompt was to have a creature with a beak on the cover. And if you have watched the show Over the Garden Wall, the comics have the exact same vibe. Like, it's cute, but it's also a bit creepy and unsettling. And I just super enjoyed it. So I gave the first volume 5 stars, and I gave the second one 4 stars. The second one I chose to fill my potions prompt with, which was to read a book under 150 pages. So by starting with these really quick reads, I sort of built a momentum, and I also didn't feel stressed about the rest of the reading I wanted to do, because I had 6 owls that I really wanted to take, so I could do any magus training and be a curse breaker. And I knocked 3 of them out really quickly, so after that I could sort of chill out with it. And the next book I read was The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I thought this was going to be my defense against the dark arts, which was to read something set at sea or by the coast, because it had ocean in the title, right? Well, it wasn't an actual ocean, as it turned out. It was like a metaphorical ocean or whatever. But it turned out to have shape-shifting, so I got it for transfiguration instead. And I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was a really good portrayal of how helpless it is to be a child. We're in the perspective of a 7-year-old, but it is a book for adults. And there's some low-key magical stuff happening, but it also has like very realism with magical elements, essentially. And that's something that I super enjoy. Sorry about my voice there. I don't know what else to say about it, so we'll just move on. The next book I read was one that I have owned for several years and haven't gotten to. It's called Beijing, Comrades by Tong, which is a pen name. And I read that for charms because the cover of it is white. And this was a 2-star read for me, the lowest rated book out of all the ones I read. I mean, I did read it quickly and I was engaged in the reading experience, so considering that, 2 stars might seem like a weird rating, but even though like I wanted to read it, I was also disgusted a lot of the time. at what the romance in it was like. Because what I knew from the start is that it's about a businessman who's wealthy and a poor student and their relationship. And it's set in the late 80s, early 90s. So one of them actually participates in the Tiananmen Square protest and the democracy movement. And I found those elements really interesting, and also just the little snippets of what life in Beijing was like at that time. I found that super interesting. But so their relationship, first of all, there was a huge age difference, and the businessman was a lot older, and I mean, I could have guessed that before starting. So, like, it's not that I was surprised, but I just thought that it would be handled in a different way, I guess, because this businessman is a huge asshole, and it's his head that we're in, and he talks about how he like wants to control women, and the thought of raping the younger boy excites him, and it was just, I don't know, it was just a very like unhealthy relationship, and I just hated the main character. And yeah, so I don't know, I wouldn't recommend that one, unfortunately. This was not the romance that I wanted to read. So next I went on to read another gay romance, Call Me By Your Name, by Andrzej Aciman. And I read that for Defense Against the Dark Arts, because that one actually is set by a coast. And I gave this 3 stars. I didn't super love this relationship either, even though it was nowhere near as awful as Beijing Comrades. But I don't know. Again, there was a huge age difference, and like, I don't want to be moralistic about age difference, but I just feel really weird about it. But I do get why this book was so popular, and like there was such a hype around it, but I'm also really glad that I waited to read it until there was less hype. And I also really enjoy the writing in it. It's written, in case you haven't read it, in a very like sensory and tactile way, in the way he describes things, and I really enjoy that. So it was a good read, but not my favorite romance. I guess also it serves me right, because I'm 30 years old, and maybe it's fair that it feels weird to me to read about a 7-year-old's romantic relationships, I don't know, and sexual. Like, it is very sexual, and that was kind of weird for me to read as well, because I was just like, but you're so tiny, you're so small. So I don't know, I might be too old too old for this book. The next book I read was actually 2 plays in one book, and that was for arithmancy, because the prompt was to read something out of your favorite genre, and I feel like I'm pretty versatile in what genres I can enjoy, but I don't read a lot of plays, so I thought that was fitting. And the plays were Mother Courage and Her Children, and The Caucasian Chalk Circle by Bertolt Brecht. I don't know how to pronounce that. And what these 2 plays have in common is that they both follow women who are on the road or on the run, and they wish to say something about society. I gave this 3 stars. I enjoy them fine, but I feel like there's something I might maybe don't quite understand under the surface. So I don't know, because I've just heard Brecht be really hyped by comrades and by leftists in general. So I think I don't know, I expected to connect with them more than I did. Like, I connected with the characters fine, but I expected to be moved in a way that I wasn't. I don't know whose fault that is. I think it's mine. Then I read Blood of Elves by Andrzej Sapkowski. That was for History of Magic, a book featuring witches and wizards. Blood of Elves is the first book proper in the Witcher series, and I loved it. I really enjoy the Witcher books I've read so far, and I have loved playing The Wild Hunt, and I really enjoyed the Netflix show. I am a big Witcher fan. I just really, but what I like about the books in particular, let's start there, is partly how the world building is done. It's done very well in that Sapkowski doesn't info dump like fantasy authors sometimes do, but he gives the kind of details that really make me feel that this is a full whole world. Like in this book, it's mentioned in passing that two kingdoms are in a trade war with each other, and details like that are they just make me really happy. And I also like that he deals with sort of racism with elves and dwarves and humans and that relationship. I also really love a lot of the characters. Like, Jennifer is my girlfriend and I would die for her. And Geralt is interesting to me because my boyfriend, he's called Geralt Fantasy James Bond. Like, Geralt in the games is very like wish fulfillment, kind of typical male gaze video game character. And I totally get that in the games. In the Netflix show, it's a lot like that as well. Especially with Henry Cavill walking around with like a tight ass and long hair and husky voice, and But in the books, I perceive Geralt as a lot more just like awkward, sad dad, just trying to do his job, and being pretty emo, and just trying to live. So I think there's more to him than being fantasy James Bond, essentially. But it is an apt observation when it comes to a lot of how his character is portrayed. But I don't think that's what Sapkowski was doing. I think that's what other people have done. Anyway, my next book was Ghost Trio by Lillian Q. Irwin. And I read this entirely at night, so that was my astronomy owl. I gave it 3 stars. It was nothing super special, but it was just really good fun. For some reason, I thought there would be a ghost story, or that there would be some kind of supernatural twist. But it was just like a mystery with a female romance, and I just breezed through reading it. I was never bored. It was never a dull moment, and I would have given it 4 stars, but just at times I found certain things to be a little over the top. But I did really enjoy the relationships in this one, which was a relief after my weird romance experiences earlier in the month. I thought the relationships in this one were really cute. I mean, sometimes a bit overdramatic, but they were overdramatic in the direction of good. And I have a lot more patience for that than for destructive relationships. It was really fun. I would recommend it if you feel like something easily digestible. Oh, by the way, by now you will have noticed that I read more than my 6 allotted books because I was reading faster than I had anticipated, so I just kept going. But yeah, my next read was Women Without Men by Shahrnush Parsipur. Again, excuse my pronunciation, please. And it's a contemporary, so that was for Muggle studies. Or is it contemporary? Because it did come out in 1989. But I don't know, I'm gonna count it, and you can't stop me. And this book follows a few different women in Iran and sort of their struggles with society and relationships to men and their lives cross each other. And so I went into it thinking it would be like hard-hitting with like an empowering element kind of thing. I didn't expect that there would be speculative, like magical elements in it. And I super enjoy that. That is absolutely my jam. It reminded me a little bit of Helen Oyeyemi, whose books I adore, the ones I've read so far. I don't know if that's weird to say because this book did come out before Oyeyemi started publishing, but I read her before I read this. So yeah, you know what I mean. So this is a book I would really recommend. I gave it 4 stars. It was just really excellent. And obviously then My Life by Marc Chagall, which inspired in a roundabout way this whole painting. And it's just him talking about his life, and he writes very much like an artist. Sometimes I didn't fully vibe with how he got like poetic and weird, but I'm not gonna hold that against him because I feel like that's a personal thing for me. Sometimes I really appreciated it. It just wasn't always like the right kind of thing for me. And it was also really, I always find it interesting to hear how artists have made their journeys kind of thing. Chagall also writes about the Russian Revolution and his relationship to that. Those bits were interesting to me as well. I gave it 3 stars. And lastly, I saved divination for last because that's the Hogwarts subject I care the least about. So the prompt was to assign numbers to your TBR and get a random number generator and choose your book that way. And what I did was, because my free trial on Scribd was gonna run out, so I also didn't have an audiobook going, and I like to be reading both an audiobook and a physical book because they're good for different contexts. So of all the books I had saved, I clicked to show just audiobooks, and then from those numbers I got a random one, and it landed on In Dubious Battle by John Steinbeck. I gave this 4 stars. So in this book we follow 2 communists who intervene in a strike to help it win, and I found it really interesting. Interesting enough that I gave it 4 stars, despite one factor that I didn't really enjoy, which is how little of a role women played, and also how some of the characters talked about women. This can be read as a historical documentation, so I guess it could be contextualized that way. But I also feel like this is set in the 1930s. Surely there were women workers, and also I just feel like regardless of the reason it did dampen my enjoyment. But it is still a book I would recommend if you want to read about class struggle. There's still something to be gained from it, even though I don't know which side Steinbeck was actually on. I hope he was on the side of the working class, but he did get a Nobel Prize, and I feel like if he had been a staunch communist, the Nobel Prize committee would have been like, maybe not. But what do I know? That is all, and I've been talking for a long time. Jeez. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed seeing me paint and hearing me talk about this. Please let me know if you read anything this month, and if you liked it and what it was. And also give me book recs about class struggle and realism with magical elements. Those are the things I am looking for right now. I mean, I do have a big TBR, but you know, I can always do with more. I also want to just shout out reading theory as well as fiction. And for that, I've recently been reading Social Reforms or Revolution by Rosa Luxemburg, which is a really great work and astonishingly relevant considering how long ago it was written. But it just goes to show that we still haven't solved the fundamental problems of capitalism, and that is what we will go on to do. So speaking of that, my vision for the painting that I have been painting, the reason I was so inspired by Chagall's painting was that the red color and the dancing just instantly made me think of like taking over the world, as in workers taking power and succeeding with a revolution. And I wanted to express some of that joy that I look forward to myself, because I do believe that we will win eventually, and I'm going to do my best to make that happen. And you should join me. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for listening and watching, and extra big thank you to my patrons. Stay safe. As safe as you possibly can. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.